Hey, what's up guys? Hey, welcome back to another video. This is going to be a little bit of a twist on the normal content that I put up there, but this is going to be a breakdown and kind of overview of the Shaman tanking playstyle and the way I've been kind of like trying to make this character work in a Shaman tanking role. Now, a couple, prefaces to this video. I'm not at all saying that Shamans are better tanks than warriors. However, there are scenarios and situations where I feel like Shaman has a ton of added value that other tanks either don't provide, or just being able to fit a very kind of like niche role that's really unique and actually does provide a lot of utility and benefit to raid type content. Shamans are a very, very good fit in scenarios if you're geared for it and you know what you're doing to be able to off tank really effectively. Not to mention you can basically always just throw on enhanced gear and just DPS as an enhanced shaman on fights where you only need one tank or things like that. So it's a really good alternative, like for Ongar, for example, or Major Domo, or scenarios where you need 4 or 5 tanks, but you don't need 4 or 5 tanks for the entirety of the raid, right? So during the rest of the time, you can DPS really effectively with this same spec just by throwing on enhanced gear, allowing you to be a really well, geared and itemized and spec'd off tank for those situations that you need it in certain raid groups. Not to mention any kind of 10-man or even like ZG type stuff. I'll be posting some stuff. I'm going to try and tank a ZG later today here. But all that easier type content is very, very doable as a Shaman tank. So with that being said, let's go through a couple things. I'm going to go through race and talents, and then I'll go through kind of my gearing and wish list type stuff as well. So going on to race, you have obviously Troll, Tauren, and Orc. I was torn a little bit between Tauren and Orc. Tauren obviously gets a 5% stam buff. I believe it's 5% stam buff, which would be really significant. With this setup, I have around 300 stamina unbuffed, so that would be another 30 stamina, right? Another 300 health, so I'd be sitting around 4,400 health. That would definitely be nice. The kind of bigger picture of what I was hoping to get as far as itemized with this character is being able to get a really good axe at some point, in which case you have the Orc racial with the axe being another 3% hit against raid boss type scenarios, which is really, really valuable considering it allows you the opportunity to itemize completely defensive. So a big thing with Shaman tanking specifically is the itemization, right? Because we don't have tier gear as an option for defensive itemization, right? We have very minimal options as far as getting defensive items. So you don't want to have to be wasting your next slot on hit pieces or your rings on hit pieces or things like that. You want to be able to itemize everything defensive if you can. That way you have the Orc racial pulling up those kind of offensive 3% hit in addition to all your other stats. That was my logic. That was my thought process. That's kind of the experiment that we're going with here. Troll is also a great choice because of the berserking racial. However, for me personally, I would prefer the consistency over a 3-minute cooldown. So I would pick between Tauren or Orc because of the consistent health pool increase or the consistent Orc axe racial, assuming you're able to get your hands on a good axe. Now that that's out of the way, let's go through the talents really quick before I go through the gear so you can kind of see my thought process. I'll touch on a couple other alternatives as far as specs go, but a couple of the big ones here, you can see I have Elemental Fury. This is a big one just for when you do get crits on your shocks. It does give you a massive threat lead, especially if it happens in the beginning of a pull. This also allows you the opportunity, assuming that does happen, to be a little more conservative with your mana following that because you get such a big threat spike. So there is some benefit, obviously, to having this. Elemental Devastation is also really good. However, the uptime on this is a little hit or miss. And if you have a faster weapon, I think this talent has a lot more value. So if you're using something like 2.0 or 2.3 weapon speed type stuff, I would say this has less value and isn't as important. So that would maybe change your decision as far as how you would talent. Elemental Focus is a big one. It basically is a 10% mana reduction. Reverberation in a perfect world, I would have put a couple more points in this because I think the cooldown on this being reduced is more important than 2% damage increase on it. And then Elemental Warding is obviously really good. One of the few talents in the game that provides this kind of spell mitigation, and none of the other tanks have access to something like this. So this is actually a really good one if you're doing MC or content that has, you know, a lot of fire or frost or nature damage in it. 10% mitigation is a lot. Convection, like I said here, 10% mana, basically 10% chance to reduce 100% of the spell cost. So these two in conjunction with each other help a lot with your just overall mana efficiency and not running out of mana. You'll see when we get to the gear, we obviously have a good amount of mana here, 4,500 mana unbuffed. So I haven't personally found the mana thing to be too much of an issue on hardly any of the fights. So that being said, I also am spec'd into these, so I could see if I don't have both of these talents, it being a little more problematic. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm running on that tree. Then you see down here in the enhance, we stop right here. So this is all the talents that we are running between the two talent trees. I am running shield spec just because I was hoping the 5% block chance and the increased block value is kind of just helping smooth out that incoming damage as much as possible. More so than the 5% mana. Like I said, mana hasn't been an issue, so this doesn't seem like it would be that important to me. Whereas shield spec is actually really valuable in my opinion, and very, very, very valuable if you can get something like Stylings, which is that tanking trinket. On to the next row, we got Thundering Strikes, which is the go-to here. I have 1 point here in two-handed axes and maces because this allows you, like I had mentioned, to basically be a enhanced DPS in the times where you are not off tanking or tanking anything. So this is kind of a go-to talent for me, with this idea and kind of play style being what I'm trying to go for. 5 points here in anticipation for the 5% increased dodge chance. Flurry helps a ton with our threat generation, just in general. Just being able to have high uptime on this if you have a fast weapon is massive. Toughness here for 10% increased armor from our items. Elemental weapons, increasing the attack power on our Rockbiter weapon, and parry, allowing us to unlock parry and being able to itemize for parry when we can, giving us a good chunk here of mitigation. Now I have no points in resto, another alternative as far as a build, which is I think a build I will try out here pretty soon if I am tanking more raid content, I think is actually better. This setup is very good for 5-man type stuff if you are fighting mobs that are not level 63 all of the time, like raid bosses for example, because you gain a lot of value from Elemental Fury. However, when you start fighting against higher level mobs and your hit chance is reduced, Nature's Guidance is going to gain value. Part of my initial idea with this setup and running as an orc is getting axe spec, running Nature's Guidance, having a good weapon in your main hand, and basically itemizing all of your other gear defensively, allowing your melee hit threat to be very high and consistent while not having to itemize offensively. You basically would be getting 6% hit with no gear at all accounting into that, which is really, really significant. So that was kind of the original idea of where this all kind of started and why I picked Orc and all this stuff. So I think in a perfect world, I would spec something similar to this and then go down into Resto, get Nature's Guidance. I'm not exactly sure where I would throw the other points. It's hard to really say, but I feel like all of these talents here are really kind of valuable and somewhat essential to this playstyle. The only thing I could see potentially is maybe dropping toughness, and you could come down here in weapon mastery or something like that for your overall threat output. But I currently right now, with my gear setup and just the limited experience I've had in doing raids and stuff like that, it doesn't seem like that would be significantly better. But I do think Nature's Guidance would be a really big pickup for raid type content. 3% hit on your shocks, 3% hit on your melee, allowing you just to be a little more reliable and consistent. While Elemental Fury is great, the consistency, in my opinion, is more valuable than the upside chance of you being able to crit and proc this. Not to mention, if you do crit and you don't have this talented, your shocks will crit for 900 instead of 1200, or something like that. So you're obviously going to be losing out on some of the threat in those situations, but I think the consistency is well worth it. Now let's go on to the gear real quickly here, and I'm going to I'll kind of breeze over this and then talk about kind of the idea behind the itemization here. So we have the tier 2 helmet. I have the dodge neck off of Magmadar from Molten Core. Tier 1 shoulders. This cloak is off of it's out of ZG. With the 1% added block value on it, is a really good alternative until we can get something from BWO. Then we have the tier 2 chest, which I got lucky with this on a BWO run. We have wrist guards of the True Flight, which are very, very, very good for us for a very long time. Tier 1 gloves, I have the belt off of, this is a quest reward from the ZG quest, the very first one that you can get. This is leather, so I'm basically losing 100 armor, but it's itemized really, really well and has just a lot of stats on it. So that's why I'm using it. It's just a really, really good belt. I haven't gotten Therazane's link yet out of BWO. Now we have the tier 2 legs, another really good piece, also has some fire resist on it. Just all around really, really decent piece. Then onto the boots, we got Sabbatons of the Flame Walker. I just got these last night, but these are a really good pickup for us for a long time because they have a lot of stamina on them for the gear that we have access to. 27 stamina is a lot, so I think I'm going to be using these for a very long time. Onto the rings, I got Nagel Ring and Ring of Protection. In a perfect world, I would have the heavy Dark Iron Ring out of Molten Core here in this bottom slot. Giving me a lot of extra defense, and that has 20 stamina on it, so that'd give us another 110 health in comparison to this ring, and still has I think like 110 armor on it. And then on the trinkets, I have Mark of Tyranny and Onyxia Blood Talisman. Now this is probably the most what would be the word, the most kind of unorthodox pickup, as a lot of people would say, to grab the neck off of this quest rather than the trinket. However, this trinket is really good for us considering it has defense on it, which defense trinkets are hard for us to pick up. 15 fire resistance, which is massive in all of the BWL, Molten Core, and Onyxia content, as well as having 1% chance to parry. Parry is really, really good. I like it more than dodge because it has kind of a counterattack mechanic, which actually does help with your threat output. It's better, in my opinion, than dodge, but it's a lot harder to get than dodge. There's a lot of things you can get that increase your agility, which increase your dodge. You don't have those same stats available to you when it comes to parrying. On to the shield, we have Malister's Defender, and I have Eskander's Right Claw. These two are our BIS, basically weapon and shield for everything up to Molten Core, and even into BWL. There's definitely some upgrades, but these are still very good options. Now, Malister's Defender is really good because it's itemized very well for us as Shamans, and it has 2800 armor on it, so it's a really beefy shield. If you look at other shields in the game, they're very even stuff that comes out in later content, they're like not that far off as far as armor value, so this is a really, really good pickup if you can grab this. Eskander's is really amazing for us because of this proc. So on to kind of how threat works and how we generate threat. We have shocks, we have melee attacks. Those are the two ways that we're generating threat simultaneously, right? Shock has a 2x multiplier on the threat, meaning if Earth Shock hits for 500, it will generate 1,000 points, of threat. If Rockbiter's a 1.3 multiplier, meaning if you swing with your auto attack and it hits for 100 damage, you're generating 130 points of threat. So that's how those multipliers work simultaneously. The multiplier on the 1.3 with Rockbiter scales basically multiplicatively with increased attack speed. So things like Flurry, where you're not changing the actual damage output, you're just changing the quantity of times that you're damaging, basically just multiplies into that threat, that 1.3. You're gaining that 1.3 multiplier more often in a 1 minute window. Hopefully that makes sense. But things like this where you're gaining 30% attack speed for 5 seconds, this is basically a second Flurry proc that stacks on top of Flurry. So if I get Flurry and Eskander's goes off, my auto attacks go down to a 0.89 second swing timer. Every 0.89 seconds I'm swinging, so you're like just a ton of constant damage. So this is really helpful for a couple reasons. One, the fact that its baseline attack speed is so fast, and you have these procs stacking on top of each other, your threat inputs are happening very quickly. So this helps kind of even out your threat so that you have a consistent threat occurring throughout the course of the fight. Then you add your shocks in on top of that, giving you these kind of big chunks of threat that you can throw on top of those autos. And help you kind of like stay ahead. But the fact that this is so fast makes it so it's very consistent. You're not, if you get 2 misses in a row, it's not going to be completely devastating. That's going to happen in like a 1.5 window, right? Or a 2-second window. Whereas if you're using a slower weapon, that could be a 4 or 5 second window, which could be really problematic. So for that reason, this weapon is really good. Rockbiter, basically TLDR, scales multiplicatively with attack speed. So for that reason, this is a really good pickup for us for a very long time. The only thing I would sub this out with is if I was able to get a really good axe, like something like Doom's Edge, or what is it, Kolsharok, or whatever it's called, the axe off of Neff. One of those axes, because of the just increased damage on those weapons, a ton of stats on those weapons, and the fact that we're an orc and we have the axe racial on those weapons. But hopefully that makes sense when it comes to gearing. Now, you can see here my neck, my back piece, and then our rings and our trinkets are all itemized defensively. That's kind of the idea with this playstyle, and what I've set up for my tank setup is that I have as much defensive stats as I can in those slots. Now, in a perfect world, perfect world, I would pick up something like the Elementium Reinforced Bulwark. This has a shitload of stamina on it, also increases your block value, and has defense on it, and it's around the same armor as the shield that we're currently using. So this is a really good pickup for all those stats. Are really great if we could itemize for those. In addition to that, the other really big pickup of what I would want is Stylines. Now this increases our block chance by 5%, block value by 24%, and defense by 13. Now remember, there's a component when it comes to the talents. When we get this shield block, we have the 5% increased shield block, but we're also increasing the amount blocked by 25%. So anything that has block value on it, you're gaining bonus 25% because of this talent. So in turn, that's making things like this 24 is going to be, what is that, 24 plus like another 6. So it'd be like 30 block value you're getting from this trinket, not to mention 5% block. So you'd be around, what does that make it, 20, what is my, we're at 12% right now, it'd be another 5%, you'd be at 17% block just with Stylines. You get the bonus defense, which is going to increase your block, parry, and dodge. You also are getting increased block value, and then you're able to pick up something like this shield. Same thing, increased block value, increased defense, more stamina. So you can see how these synergize all really well together. This would help a lot with kind of evening out our incoming damage, I would think. Again, we're gonna have to try and get those items and really test it for ourselves to see, but that's kind of my thought process here of the two really big ticket items. If we could pick those up, that would be ideal. Stylines changes a lot of things for us. In my opinion, once we get Stylines, defense is basically our best stat because our block chance is so high. Our overall chance of mitigating any incoming damage goes up significantly because of that 5%. So you really want to try and increase your defense as much as possible. That makes things like the Head of Nefarian, where you get the defensive neck, really good. There's also a cloak. Let's see if we can find it. This one, Elementium Threaded Cloak, which is a really good cloak for us with 2% dodge on it. Really significant. That's another thing I'd definitely be wanting to pick up if I could. But with that being said, guys, this is kind of where I'm at so far. My hope is that I can pick up a couple more pieces of tier 2, hopefully pick up some of these more oddball tank pieces that most of the Fury tanks are not interested in getting, and kind of test some of this stuff out. We did run Molten Core, so go ahead and feel free to check out that stream. That was my first time tanking Molten Core on my Shaman. It didn't go perfect, but it went well. We did good. It was fun. It was interesting. Had a good time. We also tanked Ubers, which I'm going to throw up a video of that as well. So if you guys want to check that out, you are more than welcome to. We're going to be taking some ZG, all kinds of fun stuff. So keep a lookout for that kind of stuff. And I don't want to make this video too long. So on that note, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.